Welcome to YourTown television program. My name is Jeff Kline. I'm your host for this segment that is sponsored by the Naval Postgraduate School Foundation. In this segment, we highlight faculty and students who are at the Naval Postgraduate School doing very interesting work. In this segment, we have Dr. Natalie Webb, who is the Executive Director of the Defense Resources Management Institute. Natalie, welcome to YourTown radio and television program.
Thank you, Jeff. Thanks for inviting me.
You are the Executive Director, and we'll get to the part and the important work that the Defense Resource Management Institute does. But first, let's start with you. How did you come about coming to the Naval Postgraduate School in Monterey?
Many years ago, 26 or 7 to be exact, I first heard of the Naval Postgraduate School, and I was intrigued by the job that I came into, which was an assistant professor in the Defense Resources Management Institute, because of the focus on teaching. Many universities, as you know, focus either on research or on teaching, and DERMI, or the Defense Resources Management Institute, focused probably equally on both. And I was excited by the opportunity to serve and to provide interesting and we hope helpful information to folks from around the world.
Well, do you have any history of military service in your family or defense in your family at all?
Yes, sorry to say, my friend from the Navy, that my family was Army. My brother and my father served in many
Oh,
of
that's
them.
okay. We forgive you. But at least you had experience of public service and that sort of thing. Well, now, you obviously came here with your PhD. So tell us a little bit about your schooling and what your specialty was.
So my specialty was public finance. I came from Duke University in Durham, North Carolina.
Oh, okay.
Big transition across the country. The specialty was helpful in that it brings public economics, public budgeting, public finance kinds of skills into an institute that needs to be able to teach those kinds of things.
So as far as public contributions go and that sort of thing, but was Duke a specialty in that, or what did you do your dissertation in? What did you
My
focus on?
dissertation was in a little bit different area. It was in looking at the effect of taxation policy and government policy on nonprofits, specifically nonprofit corporate foundations, which doesn't sound like it would translate well into a military school, but it does. And the reason it does is because people in both those organizations are not focused on profits. They're focused on meeting the mission or the objective.
Some service in some way.
Correct.
So I'm curious about the dissertation part now. How did taxation relate to was it the ability for nonprofits to actually raise money or to execute that money or service?
So it was the ability to draw the funding from the corporations into the foundations because they get a tax break to do so. And as you adjust the rates and the policies for that, you may affect how much money goes to the foundation, which then goes to the cause that the foundation serves.
It's a fascinating thing that economists do. So let's shift now back to the Defense Resources Management Institute.
Okay.
Tell us a little bit about it. Why was it formed? Is it part of MPS or hosted by MPS? Tell us a little bit about the Institute.
So the Defense Resources Management Institute was formed in 1963
Before your time.
Right. By a group of people known as the Whiz Kids who came into the Pentagon. With
Sure.
Remember this? So the idea is that they would bring the best practices from business, from outside the world, into the Department of Defense to improve our analytical decision-making skills and our resource allocation decisions.
And this was from Ford Corporation, is that right?
I think that's correct.
Yeah, okay.
Ford Motor Company,
Yeah.
That's correct. So when these gentlemen came into the Pentagon, they decided we need some educational branch work to be able to spread the message of what we think is important. So they gave a course to the Army and they gave a course to the Navy, and now you know which one is still standing.
Right.
52 years later, we're still at the Naval Postgraduate School, been there the whole time. We actually don't belong to the Navy.
Okay.
We belong to the Department of Defense, specifically the Undersecretary Comptroller would direct our activities. However, our personnel do belong to the Navy, so we're kind of a hybrid and really value being at the Naval Postgraduate School.
So we'll continue on that line, but just out of curiosity, so you actually fall under the DoD Comptroller, not their analytical organization, which they have a separate analytical organization, but in fact it's the Comptroller organization that you all belong to.
Are you referring to the cost assessment?
Yes,
and program
yes.
So cost assessment and program evaluation is probably the number 2 person on our policy guidance council. So they come and they also tell us what they would like to see us do.
So you have more than one boss. How nice.
I have lots of bosses.
Including the local ones.
Exactly.
And that sort of thing. So, DERMI, and let's start calling it DERMI now, has its own faculty and its own faculty structure.
That's right.
So tell us a little bit about how that works. I mean, how, as an assistant or associate professor, how did you come in, and is it a tenure process as well?
So our faculty, I think, is a great mix. We do have tenure track faculty. So the faculty of the Naval Postgraduate School obviously have to meet quality standards for research and for teaching and service. So that is the draw for PhDs to come into our institute. But we also have lecturers and senior lecturers who are not trying to get tenure. They are people bringing professional knowledge, operational skills. Most of them have a military background.
So they're your adjunct faculty, very similar
They
to
are.
regular universities.
I'm sorry. We also have probably the most, percentage-wise anyway, number of active duty. We have one from every service on our faculty.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And now they're assigned there as part of the faculty as well.
That's right.
And so besides economists, what different other faculty specialties do you have?
So currently the biggest ones are economists, operations researchers, decision analysts, project management, public kinds of things. Over history, we've had organizational psychologists and some other interesting folks.
Oh, you got to go there. So how does an organization have a psychology? I mean,
it's great if you think about trying to make organizations change.
Right.
Somebody has to help you figure out how to get that message across in a way that other people will buy into it.
So you started with the history of the Institute as focused on our own services, and yet you branch out so many other different classes now.
That's right.
Who do you teach, and what are your classes like?
So our classes are half probably U.S. participants and half international. Originally, we were a U.S.-focused program, but we quickly discovered that we could learn as much from folks from other organizations, and so we began to include international participants. We've had them for, 40 years or something. I'm sorry, what was the other part of the question?
The question itself was, so you offer a set course on something.
Yes.
Give me one of your course titles.
So the main one is Defense Resources Management Course.
Okay, Defense Resources Management Course.
Yes.
That is offered at a certain time.
Yes.
And then you have international students come in.
Correct.
As well as U.S. students come in.
That's right.
At the same class.
Yes.
How do they enroll in such a thing?
So for U.S., it's just by a quota system. Each service can send as many as they can get in, and so they call the person who manages our seats and schedule themselves for a course.
Okay.
For internationals, it's a much different process. Through the combatant commanders, there are education and training plans set by country, and in those countries, they are able to go within the U.S. Embassy personnel to say, we would like to register people for this course. And if they do, then they will show up in Monterey.
So it's through our senior commanders in the various areas that they request those courses.
That's right.
Now, do all the people who attend the course in uniform then?
No. In fact, we do not allow uniforms, and by and large, we are on a first-name basis, including, a little interesting point, right before he became king, the King of Jordan was in the class, and he was not going by king in that class.
Oh, really? That's
or
great.
by rank.
Well, he still comes periodically to the coast.
Does.
Is that right? Does he ever visit the school again?
He does. He came to visit us, tried to come under the radar, but 6 big black vehicles didn't
Oh,
work
no,
out
they
so well.
don't. When you get all those vehicles in line with all the
Yeah.
security people, then that never works very well. So tell us a little bit about what's taught in that particular course then.
Okay. That's a 4-week course in which the students or participants go all day, every day, and we talk from the beginning to the end about what we would call programming in the United States. How do you make the resource allocation decisions that you do? What are the analytical models that would support making a better decision, understanding costs, effectiveness, how much time it takes to get things, and the risks that they're going to encounter in these various decisions?
So a lot of systems analysis,
That's
essentially.
correct.
Yeah.
Yes, that's correct.
And then what other courses are offered?
So we have an international defense management course that is by and large all international. We do allow U.S. folks to sit in that one. And we have a senior international defense management course that is flag level and senior executive service. That's really fun. We usually have 1, 2, or 3 U.S. participants and anywhere from 35 to 50 internationals in that class.
Now, besides your own faculty, which sounds like they're fairly worked, do you all ever get experts from other areas to come in and give briefs?
Well, occasionally we have weaknesses, and that's why we invite people like you. No, it's not all weaknesses. We invite others who have expertise in particular areas that we think would either be a good addition or that a particular class needs to hear. Obviously faculty come and go, and at times we need others to come in.
So as director, do you still get a chance to teach?
Not as much as I would like. The
Okay.
answer is yes, but not as much as I
I was
would
going to say,
like.
you came here specifically to teach.
That's right.
And now you find yourself in a management position.
That's right.
So let's go a little bit to the students as they come here, because you said they're a mix of U.S. officers, U.S. people, as well as international. During the course period, did they get a chance to actually see Middle California and enjoy the area?
They do. If they're here in a 4-week or longer class, they participate in something called the Field Studies program, which would take them on a few outings, field trips, kinds of things. And they're also really good. They learn how to take the bus system. They walk down to the street market. They love to learn about California history. They go to the missions. They go to the walk. They start over at Colton Hall and try to learn about all the older buildings.
So tell me a little bit about these field places. Where do they go?
So if they're in the 10-week course, the International Defense Management course, they go to Washington, D.C. for 5 days.
Oh, so you're talking about a country experience.
Yes,
right.
They do. And then if you're in the senior course, they go up to the Bay Area and visit various things.
Do we ever take them on the river areas where there's wines and that sort of thing?
Well, probably, yeah. Probably, but I
they do that themselves.
I wouldn't know that, yeah.
That's right. So how many people normally go through Dermi in 1 year?
So in residence, somewhere around 400. And then we have maybe almost close to that many internationally, plus a whole lot of mini courses, short courses, in the thousands of students who get short courses.
Well, let's talk about that international piece, because mainly we've been focusing on the resident piece and we have some time. So tell us a little bit about your international outreach.
So as part of the Defense Security Cooperation programs run by the U.S. government, we are asked to go to various parts of the world to offer anything from a 1-week to a 2-week course on defense resources management. It may have a specific focus. But for example, I have a team going to Rwanda over Thanksgiving, sadly, going for 2 weeks, and I have another team going to Jordan the following week. Both of those will be doing 2-week courses to help local military, not our folks, learn about resource allocation.
Well, now, when you say focus, does the host country decide what topic is actually addressed?
They do, but they have to go through the U.S. programs. So the combatant commander, again, would be the ultimate authority on what the military education and training program will be.
And is that funded by the combatant commander, or is it funded by a central fund that is outside of their control?
So both the State Department and the Department of Defense policy folks have what's called an International Military Education and Training budget, and that would go to many partner nations that they could turn around and use for something like our course. If they're not covered by that agreement, so a NATO country, a number of other countries would pay full price, and they'd pay it through foreign military sales.
Well, your focus is primarily by charter and by an organization on defense-related organizations. And yet much of the material you teach is much broader than that.
That's right.
So do you ever see actually Dermi's responsibilities actually growing into other areas, other government areas?
It would be fascinating. It would be
Well,
wonderful.
for example, the State Department could certainly use help in programmatics, as well as to Treasury and Interior, and as well as other countries' departments of those.
So current limitations are faculty and facilities.
Oh, I see. So that real thing, the resource aspect.
Yeah, exactly.
So you think you're pretty busy right now?
We are. We're pushing work back and taking on some things we would say out of hide.
Oh, I see. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, does that mean you're still looking for faculty, or are you?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. We have 5 or 6 positions open.
Well, let me. We'll talk a little bit about those positions, because you never know where this is going to go.
That's right.
What are those positions?
Mostly they are for PhDs. We're very thin in PhDs right now. So operations research, economics, public administration, public budgeting, defense analysis. But we also have 1 and possibly 2 coming that would be folks who are either in uniform that bring professional skills, or folks who are just coming out of some related kind of thing at the master's level.
Well, let's. I'm glad you said that, because you never know that someone may be seeing this on the web, or see it when it's broadcast, and they say, "Yeah, I know my son or uncle or something like that's looking for that capability." So that's great, and we'll get them in contact with you if they're interested. I'd like to go back to you for a little bit, and you talked about your desire to teach, but also you do a little bit of research. So you recently published a paper with some colleagues. Can you tell us a little bit about that and what that dealt with?
So that paper was really fun. I did that with 2 of my colleagues, Jonathan Lippo and Laura Army. And what we did was look at data on 49 countries, and we looked at what the effect might be of taking away the cash-based economy. So many people are paid in cash, many people buy their groceries in cash. So it's called the cashless battlefield. And we tried to measure the effects on things like robbery and burglary of areas that had converted from cash to more cashless or electronic-based transactions.
So you're talking about like credit cards and debit cards and that sort of thing?
And your phone, able to pay with your phone.
Scanning, sure.
Yes,
yeah.
yeah.
And what were your findings?
We found exactly what we hoped we would find, which is that a cashless battlefield does work for reducing economic-based crimes like robbery. And interestingly, it didn't have any effect on things like murder or really less non-economic crime.
Well, this is sort of challenging because in many cases where you find cashless areas, you find, and correct me here, it would be my common wisdom and assumption that you would find in more affluent areas. Mm-hmm. And more affluent areas normally have less crime anyway. So did you actually consider those factors?
So I think we would have considered that by geography, by looking within a country at regions who became more able to have those kinds of devices.
Sure. So what implication does it have for defense?
So if you think about what happens in a lot of war zones or a lot of conflict, part of the way people pay one another to do things is in cash. And if they can't do that anymore, if they're going to be tracked electronically, they have to change their operations.
Well, you're talking about impact on the black markets as well.
Correct.
For fuel, for food, for everything else.
That's right.
And so what, did the paper actually suggest a way in which to go into a crisis environment, whether that's humanitarian relief or whether it's an actual war zone, and actually employ this sort of technique?
Not so much. We did refer to some other papers that did that, but not so much as just pointing out that this is probably a pretty good idea and not very expensive.
Well, you made a decision several years ago to move to Monterey and join the Defense Resources Management Institute. We are very fortunate that you did. You're now the executive director. Mm-hmm. You've enjoyed Monterey quite a bit because we haven't left yet.
That's right.
So tell us, what are some of the things that you like most about the area?
I think what I like most is being by the water. I'm a water person. And the weather. I mean, every time you go somewhere else, you get reminded how great it is back here.
Sure. Just go to Montana in January.
Exactly.
You have no problem whatsoever.
Exactly.
Well, Dr. Webb, thank you very much for joining us today.
Thank you, Jeff.
And thank you very much for joining us for this segment. We've been talking with Dr. Natalie Webb, who's the Executive Director of the Defense Resources Management Institute. And you've joined the YourTown television program sponsored by the Naval Postgraduate School Foundation. Stand by, we'll have other faculty and guests and students talk about their work at the institution.